This is Here Before, Here Now, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.
Hi there, Colton Schoen here. I am the morning anchor and reporter for Good Morning Arizona, and I am launching this podcast called Here Before, Here Now. It deals with Native American issues and just really interesting things affecting Indian country. I really wanted to do this because I am Navajo. My family's from the Navajo Nation, and I've always made it a part of my career to highlight and tell indigenous stories, and also to make sure that people were aware that we are still here in our communities that we live in and that we report in, right? So I wanted to make that a huge part of my reporting. And so with this podcast, I'm going to be interviewing people from tribal communities, entertainers, scholars, tribal leaders, and things like that to let you know what's going on and what's impacting Indian country today. I want to introduce myself really quickly in Navajo because I know that's important for Navajo recognition. So really quickly, I will say, Yat Esh E Colton Schoen in Shie, Tohid Lini Nishle, Torich Itni Bashichi, Kia Ani Dashiche, Tabaha Dashanele. So essentially in Navajo kinship, clans are important. We recognize who we're related to. It's matrilineal. So I am water runs together, born for bitter water. So that is part of my identity, and that's how Native people introduce themselves, Navajo people at least. So thank you so much for joining me on this ride and this journey. I really hope that you learned something from it. While it is a podcast that deals with Native issues, it's not just for Native people. So hopefully you can learn something or figure out the Native people in your community, which I feel like is very important. This first episode I'm pretty excited about. It is an interview with Billy Luther. He is a Native filmmaker who has just come out with his film Frybread Face and Me. So it hit the festival circuits, and it's going to continue to do that. And I did interview him a few weeks ago. So it is important to note that with this conversation, amid the ongoing writer and actor strike in Hollywood, he is able to do this interview in his role as the director of the film. So I just wanted to get that out there. So I hope that you enjoy the conversation and continue to come back for more. Thank you.
You are listening to Here Before, Here Now, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.
My guest today is Billy Luther. He's an independent film producer and director. Billy belongs to the Navajo, Hopi, and Laguna Pueblo tribes. He studied filmmaking on the East Coast, and he's made several films. His debut was Miss Navajo, a documentary that premiered at the Sundance Film Festival back in 2007. His most recent project is a narrative feature called Frybread Face and Me, which premiered at South by Southwest earlier this year. Just want to say, Ya'ate, welcome. Thank you so much, Billy, for joining me on this podcast. How's it going?
It's going well, man. You know, I live in LA, and things are a little rough right now just because of the strike. And it's been a good kind of years. I've been also writing on the television show Dark Winds. That's been quite exciting. The new season, second season, has just launched last week. So it's happening.
How are things? How are you being affected by the strike? I mean, obviously, there's no productions going on right now with a lot of things. How are you weathering this storm?
I'm just taking some time right now to kind of do some personal kind of projects that I've kind of had on the back burner, just because of the schedule of writing, being in the writer's room, it's a long process, it's every day, Monday through Friday, and, throwing ideas out and writing. And, but, that kind of stalled, I can't take any meetings, for future positions or jobs. So it's affected not only me, but a lot of people. And I think that, hopefully, something comes up in the future, but it doesn't look so good right now.
Yeah, well, hopefully resolution can come soon. I know a lot of people are anxious to get back to work and also wanting to create content like yourself.
Right.
I know that I came about your work initially. Gosh, it was over a decade ago. I was flipping through, I think it was Netflix at the time, and I saw Miss Navajo, and I remember seeing the artwork for that, and I was just so like, oh my gosh, I have to check this out. It was the young woman, I think her name was Crystal Frazier, right? And she had her moccasins on, and I immediately clicked watch. And I got to tell you, at that point, I was probably just graduating from my journalism program at ASU. And I thought to myself, this is exactly the kind of stories that I want to tell. Native issues, Native people brought on by someone with that Native perspective, and I want to know how far you think you've come since then. I mean, obviously that was your first debut, and I'm sure you've learned a lot behind the camera, and also now telling narrative stories.
Right. I went to film school in Chicago, Columbia College, Chicago, and I went into for writing and directing, and when I came to LA, I knew it was a little cheaper to just borrow a camera and go out and film a documentary. And so I did that. My mother was Miss Navajo in the 60s. So these stories of the pageant and my mother's experience has been with me, throughout my life. So I wanted to kind of show this world of Crystal Frazier, she's a tomboy, basketball star up in Shiprock. And somebody you wouldn't think that would run in a pageant, a beauty pageant. So, I just clicked with Crystal, and I knew there was something really special, And like I said, I would drive back and forth from LA to the res, and really kind of get to know her. And it was a great learning experience. And I didn't know I was going to go into documentaries at that time. So. It kind of like helped catapult my career as a filmmaker.
Do you keep in touch with her?
Every now and then I'll text her or email, but in the documentary, she mentions that she aspired to go to college for aerospace, and the last time I contacted her was like maybe a couple of years pre-pandemic, and she's working for NASA now. So,
oh my gosh, wow!
It's really cool. It's to see how that how she wanted to do something in her teen years, and then now she's doing it. It was incredible.
That's pretty cool. It's like the power of manifestation, right? You think about something you want to do, and gosh, like you're an example of that. I'm sure of it happening and working out.
I have been in this business for, about 20 years, and it's been, challenging at times, but, I just stuck with it. I was fortunate to, have a script, Frybread Face and Me, and that kind of helped. I was just kind of in documentaries, it's really kind of hard to make a living working in documentaries, There's not necessarily, you don't have theatrical runs mostly in documentaries. It's really rare. And so I just kind of wanted to kind of develop something that was, from, this kind of, feature. And something started happening, and we were filming Frybread up in New Mexico. We were just about to end when Res Dogs, came on board. So it was kind of like, Res Dogs kind of launched a few summers ago, and I think that got people really excited about seeing natives on screen, contemporary natives on screen.
Absolutely, absolutely. And talking about Frybread Face and Me, tell us about this story. I know the synopsis is you have a young boy, Benny, who lives in San Diego with his mom and his dad. He is sent to live with his Grandma Lorraine on the Navajo Reservation for a while, and there he meets his cousin, Frybread Face, Dawn, and they develop this friendship. What is this story to you?
I grew up in San Diego. My mother's full Navajo. My dad is half Hopi and half Laguna. So living, in an urban environment, you kind of always stuck out, and you didn't really fit in there. And then also, I'd visit my grandmother on the res and didn't quite fit, in those places, Laguna or the Hopi res or Navajo. So it was always this kind of like, identity. I was always kind of questioning my identity. And yeah, I just kind of came, sometimes you just think about, ideas and like Miss Navajo, that story was just in front of me the entire time. And that's kind of what, Frybread Face and Me. This story was just, from, an experience that I lived growing up off the reservation.
As a person who grew up similarly to you, I'm from Phoenix. I was born and raised here. Both my parents are from the Navajo Nation, and I just saw so many parallels when watching your movie and in my own life. You're that city boy. That's what I was called as a kid too. And going up there and, having the expectation that I go out and help herd the sheep or, bring in firewood and chop firewood. Like that is an experience, obviously, that is not special to me. A lot of people, especially who are Native, who have family and ties on the reservation and who live in urban areas, go back and do. So it was really cool to see that tie, and that was on the television on this movie. And it was really beautifully told. It was really well done. And I got to tell you, Billy, when I was watching Grandma Lorraine, I really, felt, it kind of like struck me. It kind of like a gut punch, because it reminded me of my grandmother, Shamasana. I mean, she's no longer here with us anymore, but seeing her speak Navajo, fluent Navajo on this movie, it just brought me home, and I'm sure that's what you want people to feel when they watch your movies.
Yeah, that was the thing kind of growing into these characters. I really had to know these characters inside and out, and those grandmothers like Grandma Lorraine in the film, were it's a generation that is kind of like from the past, and those fluent speakers and traditional attire, it was really a tribute, to our grandmothers. And even though, like in the film, Benny speaks English and grandmother only speaks Dene, the Dene language, it was really interesting, growing up and not having that communication with my grandmother. I always had to have my mom or my aunts and uncles kind of translate. And it was just something that really struck me, So when I, had this character, Grandma Lorraine, I really kind of wanted to have her language be such a part of her and the world that we were coming into.
Mm-hmm.
And as I kind of went around to different film festivals, I would have non-native people, talk to me about, talking, their fluent grandmothers and great grandmothers, and, not just, it would be kind of like other, indigenous people around the world. And I think that was really kind of something that it brought people into the world, even if they weren't Dene.
Yeah. When I say gut punch, I just mean like I saw my grandmother in her, and made me miss mine so much. So seeing that representation, was just like, oh my gosh. It was another thing that I thought you did so well when it came to your first movie. Oh my gosh, there's this Native person who's doing this and telling our stories and an accurate representation on the screen. I just, that almost brought a tear to my eye. So I just wanted to give you props for that. You probably hear that all the time though, which,
No, I don't.
Okay, good. Well, I mean, it was really like powerful to see that. So, thank you for evoking that in me. I'm not an emotional person, but when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, this totally reminds me of her. So, thank you for that.
And on that, I think that's where my documentary background really came into play when I was directing her. I didn't say, oh, you need to hit this mark, for a camera, for framing. I just wanted the camera to follow her. I wanted to create this world of, this is grandmother's land and home. And, we built that entire set, the ranch, grandmother's ranch, from, there was nothing there, and we created this world that I wanted, not only, grandmother Sarah, who played Grandma Lorraine, but all the characters, to feel like this was home. And we got that. We accomplished that.
Oh yeah, there's that level of authenticity for sure. I mean, when I saw the set and I saw the trailer and I saw the Hogan and everything else, I was like, oh my gosh, my family's place still looks like that, and this is supposed to take place in the 80s, right?
Yeah, 1990.
90s,
So
90, yes, right.
yeah, no, it was great. And we had a Navajo set designer prop people. So they really dug into kind of like everything, the cast iron,
Right.
and the water on, the hauling water, the buckets, near the sink. So it really kind of, it was a team effort, and we really worked hard to get those pieces, those little details right.
So after you had this completed, you had it premiered at South by Southwest. What's the feeling like to be in the audience with other people and have them just experience what you just put on screen?
Yeah, it was 2 years. We really spent editing and the score and just a lot of editing. We took our time with it, and so I went to South by in March, and I really have a hard time watching my own work.
Uh-huh.
In a theater setting. All my past work, I'm just kind of like, I don't know. There's something in me like I feel like I'm just gonna pass out.
Sure, sure.
Um, But that opening moment where Benny just runs out of the diner and rips his shirt off, it's in the very very beginning of the film. The audience, roared with laughter. So it's like, oh my gosh, this is great. These people are on this journey that I'm gonna put them on. And after that, the laughs, we had natives in the audience, and the little details of native humor was in there. And I think that it kind of was it was just a great, feeling. And I promised myself when I was going to the premiere that I wasn't going to sit in the audience and watch it because I was like,
Uh-huh.
oh my god. But I had to stay because it was something that I just couldn't, have even imagined. And the work that our editor put in, and our composer, it was incredible feeling.
Well, thank you for letting me watch this. It definitely is going to be one of my new go-tos once it's available in a wide format. I tell you, for me, one of my go-tos to this day is still Smoke Signals, right? I mean, that movie, I think, really broke barriers when it came to indigenous narrative storytelling for the big screen. Where do you see the industry now when it comes to Native people doing what you're doing? You mentioned Res Dogs, you mentioned Dark Winds. It seems like Rutherford Falls is another example. It seems like there's more, I guess, indigenous storytelling and media out there nowadays.
Yeah, Smoke Signals really broke kind of the door, and allowed kind of more indigenous people to say, oh gosh, maybe I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
I knew at an early age, that I was going to make movies. I was probably like 8, 9 years old, and I just knew I had a VHS recorder, and I was, making little movies with my neighbors. Um, and Smoke Signals was like the film that I would see, and be like, oh, this was Native written and Native directed. Before then we have kind of Dancing with Wolves. There was no natives really in the creative process, and no, the writers and directors were non-native. But I really was looking for contemporary stories of Native people. A lot of our films and television was from the past, loincloths, teepees, and horses and cowboys, and it was really great to kind of see Smoke Signals kind of just show a more contemporary side of Native life. Um, and Taika Waititi, who's an executive producer on Frybread Face, he also helped, open the door for a lot of indigenous, filmmakers, storytellers around the world, and he also executive produced Reservation Dogs. And it's exciting, we're in an exciting time. We were on strike, We went to go picket over at Disney, and they had an all native writers picket. So we got to meet a lot of people who we heard of and or have known, and it was a really great gathering to spend the day picketing with these other native writers. And there's a lot of us, in LA. So it's exciting, to see. I know that Res Dogs said that, this season, their third season, was going to be their final season. Rutherford Falls is not, on Peacock anymore. But I just see, so many people are pumped and, have a lot of ideas. And it's great. It's I know Erica Tremblay, who has Fancy Dance, another feature that premiered at this past year, and Sterling Harjo are creating a show. So I think there's some really exciting work coming out, and not just the younger generation of filmmakers, but the people who stuck with it, like Sterling and I, and Taika and Sydney Freeland.
Right, absolutely. I love watching all those people you mentioned work, and it's so interesting too because when it comes to people who are not in the Native community or don't identify as being Indigenous, sometimes I'll mention these shows and these things that they should watch, and then sometimes they'll come back to me and they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, this was so good and so great." Do you feel like there's a kind of a disconnect with, I guess, non-Native people watching these shows or consuming these medias for, I guess, a number of reasons? Maybe they don't know they're out there, or maybe they don't think that this is for them, or that maybe this is some sort of storytelling that, am I allowed to listen to or watch this? What is your experience on that?
I've seen in the last 10 years, like there's there's a lot of content out there. There's all these streamers. There's still network television, which is changing. There's just so much content, and it's really kind of to make your show really stand out. It's difficult. There's a lot of challenges, um, because of ads. It pays to advertise, and but I guess I think that the audiences are looking for something new and fresh. What I've seen has been happening is there's a lot of kind of remakes of film and television, or a television show might have to come back because for instance, you get like Sex and the City, which came back as another show. Full House, same thing, they came back. So I think people were just tired of seeing kind of like the repetitive content in stories. So these kind of stories about Indigenous life is so kind of unique to audiences, and audiences have to find it. But I think like Res Dogs and Rutherford Falls and this film Frybread, I think it invites an audience in. It doesn't necessarily try to make people feel guilty,
Right.
of our history. Or there's a lot of humor. There is a lot of humor in these stories. So.
Yeah, I married a white woman, and when I had first met her family, the movie Smoke Signals came into our conversation, and her parents were both like, "Oh, I love Smoke Signals," So I was like, "Oh, we have something to talk about."
Yeah.
That was interesting, because like, for me, obviously, it's there. I know where to find these types of things. But for someone who's not in the community to say, "Oh yeah, I watched that. It was such a good movie. It was hilarious." Like that is what I hope that your work and other Native people's work continues to do, right? So that people out there are aware of these stories, and that's feel like they can watch this and be a part of this conversation in terms of, oh, now I understand more of the background of, Indigenous communities and people.
Yeah, I agree. For a long period, the only film that really people would, mention is Smoke Signals. Between now and then, there's been a lot of films from Native filmmakers. Sundance is a great example of like showcasing and highlighting these works of these up and coming filmmakers. But it's just distribution. It's really difficult to get distribution, because a lot of these streamers and a lot of distributors are about money. How do they make money? Most of our projects don't have big stars attached to them. And that's always kind of like one of the biggest challenges is just getting distribution. So it's hard, and a lot of filmmakers are getting, social medias, if we can get like a TikTok, everything, a lot of, that our youth are, into a lot of social media. So that's kind of where we have to kind of do our grassroots promotion. You know, I know Native artists, not just filmmakers, but artists and fashion designers that I'm like, hey, can you like just promote this film? You know, and it's helpful. You know, they have like 50 grand. Some of them have 100, you know, thousand followers. But I don't know. It's just it's a unique, you know, world that we're kind of exploring. So I guess, you know, it's really difficult. And I can probably name a few, you know, films that people should watch that without, you know, mentioning smoke signals.
Yeah, name them, please. Yeah.
Well, Wild Indian, which Lyle Corbin had directed about a couple of years ago, and Shandine Tome. I don't know if you know Shandine.
Oh,
She
I've
has
interviewed her for my podcast previously.
yeah,
Yeah.
she did Long Line of Ladies, which is this short, 40-minute short film. She has so many other works out there that, you know, need to be seen, and you can just find them.
Yeah, she was
Um,
incredible. I interviewed her after she did Mud. And
oh,
yeah, so that
yeah,
was like pre-pandemic, 2018. 2018 when I talked to her then. And you know, I mean, she's still a young woman now, but I think at that point she had just graduated from UNM, so she must have been like, you know, 21, 22, and she was already making waves in the you know, film community.
yeah, yeah. I'm really excited to see because I know she's working on a feature, so I'm really excited to see what she does because her cinematography, you know, she's also works with the camera, and it's incredible to see her work. Yeah.
When it comes to your story and I guess what you would tell yourself, I guess, you know, at 20 years ago, would you tell yourself anything different about either this industry or how to get into it, the type of stories you wanted to tell?
Yeah, you know, I would 20 years ago, I had just wished that I had done more writing. Um, you know, I kind of doubted myself as a writer. Um, and it was really kind of this moment of just doing it. And you know, scripts were really bad early on, but it helped you, you know, get familiar with dialogue and story and arcs and story, and you know, and I just wish I, you know, maybe started earlier. You know, but I was working hard in nonfiction and documentary. So um and then also too, it's you know, a lot of people want to be writers and directors. Young natives want to be writers and directors, you know, but there's so much other work out there. There's camera, you know, there's DPs, there's composers, there's wardrobe, and other things that are really exciting. Makeup, you know, the great thing about being on Frybread Face and Me was we really hired a lot of natives, you know, in the camera. Shandine was worked for a short time on the film in the camera department, and we had Navajo makeup and hair and like I said, prop and production designers. So it makes a difference, you know, and I know a lot of people think it's, you know, it's the best to just be the, you know, writer director, and it's just, you know, it's just really challenging. But I think, you know, also it could be challenging to, you know, work in, you know, editing and other aspects of filmmaking that I think that we should, you know, also nurture and look for.
What's up next for you? I mean, I know that right now you're probably still, I guess, shopping this around or trying to get it seen in front of more people. Frybread Face and Me is what I'm talking about. But any other stuff in the works that you?
Yeah, well, you know, we're going to have our international premiere at in Toronto, the Toronto International Film Festival. So that happens in September, and that's huge. You know, that's another big. So we're fortunate to be at both South by Southwest and at TIFF. Big, you know, First Nations audience up in Canada at Toronto. So that's going to be a great kind of see how they respond to the film. And our distribution is going to be, you know, announced pretty soon. So that's going to be very exciting. And I'm just going to say that we're going to have access to a lot of people, and people are going to be able to see it. So I got to kind of keep quiet on that end, but it's going to be exciting. And, you know, I'm just kind of on this kind of strike time, I'm just kind of seeing what happens. Hopefully season 3 pops up for Dark Winds. And that's on, AMC, and that's pretty cool, experience, just, being with other indigenous writers. And just like other projects that I'm trying to kind of develop and get off the ground, hopefully there's a Miss Navajo narrative feature that I will be digging into. That's something that's been always, eating at me, and it's just like, you're going to make it one day. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Oh, that would be so cool. I would definitely be down to see that on the big screen. That's for sure. Wow. Well, thank you so much for stopping by and saying hi. It's good to actually talk to you. I know that we've exchanged messages over Instagram and things like that. It took a few months for this to kind of materialize, but it's always great to hear from people, especially people from our backgrounds, doing the work and going out and being those people who are saying, yes, we can do this, we're here.
Right. No, that's exactly. Thanks, Colton. It's been great chatting with you.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything that you want to bring up before we close out?
I'm just, how old are your kids?
So I have a 3-year-old, and I have a daughter that's due, I guess any day now. My wife just hit, she's term. So that is going to be something that is life-changing on its own.
Totally. No, and I mentioned that because I'm really excited that Frybread Face and Me, is going to exist, for the next generation. And,
Totally.
It's captured on film forever, and it was really important for me to get it right and to kind of let a new, our younger generation have, a story that they can watch over and over and over again.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Right now, I mean, for the last year and a half, I put on the Finding Nemo in Navajo for my son. So I also interviewed Natalie Benali, who played Dory in a previous podcast as well. So it was so cool to hear from her. And I think she also did some set work for your movie, Frybread Face and Me.
Oh, she was the one who really gave the details, like I mentioned before. She was our production designer and our props. So she, the funny thing about that was, we had to get a sheep head.
Oh my gosh, I remember. Yes.
And she went to Gallup and got a sheep head. So we were like, yay.
Oh my gosh.
Authenticity on screen.
Totally right. Oh my gosh. That reminded me when I brought my wife to the res once, and my grandma butchered, and in front of her, and she helped out, and I was like, yes, this is what we do, and yes, you have to eat this. This is a huge honor that my grandmother is doing for us right now. So that definitely, gosh, those little things, those moments that people who are not privy to, the day-in-day life of Native culture, Navajo culture, get to see that. And I think that's wonderful.
Right. It is. It's exciting though. It's just little details, make a big difference in our stories. So thank you.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you so much for spending time with us.
This is Here Before, Here Now, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.